Hey everybody, Rosematter here, and welcome to part 10 of my House in Fata Morgana, a Requiem for Innocence Let's Play. So we finished off the first of the sub-episodes, which was absolutely amazing. So we got to see Michelle again and a new character. And it was, of course, as is always the case with Fata Morgana, it was just like tragic but heartwarming and emotional and all that good stuff. So we're going to play the next one, which is Tales wasted away in obscurity. So that also doesn't sound like it's going to be a super happy fun time. So yeah, let's just jump right into it and let's see what this subplot and sub-story has in store for us. The vast majority of happenings in this world are not recorded in stories, either too trifling or adding no meaning to our lives. These facts of life are coldly cast aside, with only the tiniest sliver deemed worthy enough. Each day we relentlessly discard unnecessary fragments of our lives. Fragments forever lost to the ether, and we continue to the very metal. Tales afforded not their moment in the limelight, left to waste away in obscurity. I never am able to finish those, reading those things when they're long. A slow-killing poison, defectives, the painting's ramblings. Oh, okay, so it's like a sub-stories of sub-stories. Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, these two don't sound very nice. I guess we'll start with a slow-killing poison. Okay, is this going to be similar to, like, Jaren's story, where, like, it was kind of mostly told without pictures, just like an actual story? Alright, there's gonna be a lot of text, it seems like. The maid spoke little of what happened. Okay, with the maid. After what happened after the white-haired girl's disappearance in the era of roses. I guess it makes sense that, you know, we have Michelle, and we're gonna go back to Giselle as well. For she believed the rest of the tale insignificant, of no value to share with her listener, the white-haired girl herself. Thus, her role as storyteller ended with the girl's departure from the stage. While the other characters' stories continued on, they were cut from the script, afforded not their moment in the limelight, left to waste away in obscurity. A slow-killing poison. Okay, so these are, I guess it's like they said, it's just these fragments of a story that don't seem to be important to anyone else. So, Arthur Baldwin, though a character maybe we haven't heard of before. Arthur Baldwin was vexed. Shortly before they were to be married, his engagement with Nellie Rhodes, eldest daughter of the Rhodes family, had been broken off. He understood well enough why it had happened, and had it been his decision, he likely would have made the same one. So Arthur's dissatisfaction lay not with the dissolution itself, nor did he bear any fault in it. His bride-to-be had simply been gripped by madness. I hear she attacked an Abigail. Okay, so we're gonna get to see, like, subplots of stories that we saw in the first game, maybe like how it affected characters that we just didn't hear from again. Oh, I was told she took one of her eyes out. Well, we definitely know that she scalped someone and tried to seduce her brother. Even worse, she killed her. Those are but rumors, my dears. The truth is so much more dreadful. I used to work at the Rhodes Manor, you see, and the young lady, she... Initially, Arthur was skeptical of what people were saying. He assumed the tales were being exaggerated as they spread. But when the head of the Rhodes family came personally to deliver reparations and formally nullify the engagement, he gave Arthur a rough overview of what had happened. It was apparently true that Nellie had assaulted an Abigail, and it was true she spent most of her time in her room now, looking pale and sickly and drained of her spirits. And then, when he said outright, a demon's possessed her, Arthur had little choice but to believe something wasn't right. And to top it all off, Nellie's older brother Mel ran off to become a priest, presumably to get away from everything. Nellie's father implored Arthur to remain discreet about her situation. Not that he'd had any intention of going around and spreading personal details about her life. However, rumors have a nasty way of slipping through the tiniest of cracks, sneaking about in the dark like a seasoned cat burglar. What nobles like to refer to as social gatherings were in practice more like gossip gatherings. And, in short order, the Rhodes family's eldest daughter was the talk of high society. Incidentally, the painter whose downfall eventually culminated in this tragedy was also strangled by the noble grapevine, though Arthur had no way of knowing as much. Perhaps the painter's curse extended beyond the girl's hair color, and the Rhodes family was destined to be brought to ruin by the gossip of their fellow aristocrats. Yeah, like, you definitely need to have played the original game because, like, you will have no idea. You're like, wait, what? Because it's just like, okay, you will know of Nellie from if you play the main part of this game, but then you're like, wait, who's Arthur? Wait, what's this about Nellie attacking someone? Mel became a priest, huh? One evening, Arthur decided he'd sneak into the Rhodes Manor. He had requested visitations with Nellie on numerous occasions, but had been turned away every time. She's in no condition for company, was what they kept telling him, which left him no choice but to see her uninvited. I don't remember much about Arthur. I think he was kind of I can't remember if he was kind of douchey to her. I think it was just a whole thing about, like, hey, we're in an arranged marriage, let's try and make the best of it. And, she certainly was fighting against it all the way, so you can see why he'd be, like, a little frustrated by it. The aroma of the roses seemed more overpowering at night than during the day, and he wasn't sure whether it was just his imagination. The nagging irritation it caused in him was, however, not only in his mind. Arthur instructed his coachman to wait on a street a little ways out, and made the rest of the way to the manor on foot, entering through the garden. As he waded through the sea of roses, he clenched his teeth. Arthur preferred restraint when it came to both gardening and girls. What am I doing with my life? How did I end up here, sneaking about, trying to find that obnoxious little girl's room? Well, okay, maybe a little bit more douchey than I remember. Arthur had few pleasant memories of this rose garden. The Rhodes and Baldwins had a long history, so as a child he would often find himself left here to play while the adults did business. It was him, Nellie, who could never seem to stop hanging off her brother, and Mel, the textbook definition of a well-behaved aristocrat boy. Not once had he managed to step into the siblings' private world. There was only room for the two of them, leaving Arthur stuck out there all by himself. The best he could manage was a little teasing now and then. For example, saying her hair looked like the color of fallen leaves. I never asked for this engagement anyway. Who would even want to marry a girl who thinks herself some kind of princess? Not me, that's for sure. But still, he had known her practically his whole life. Of course he was going to be curious when people were saying she'd gone mad or been possessed by a demon. He was just curious, he told himself, as he drew nearer to Nellie's window. The curtains appeared to be drawn. He couldn't see anything inside, so he crouched down to pick up a few pebbles to toss over the veranda. A few soft taps rang out in the night before the curtain finally shifted. A few moments later, a young girl stumbled out into the moonlight. Despite already knowing the answer, his first thought was, who's that? He wanted to smack himself, but at the same time, it was hard to deny the discrepancies between the girl standing there and the girl of his memories. The moonlight seemed to give her flaxen hair a ghostly bluish tint. It fluttered in a passing breeze, and Arthur felt something about her he'd never had before. She's so pretty. Whoa, slow down. What's wrong with you? Pretty? That self-centered, spoiled little brat? There wasn't a trace of the rambunctious Nellie he knew to be found. She stood there by the veranda's railing, gazing vaguely off into space like a pensive spirit. It wasn't at all what Arthur had expected to see when he came calling. He assumed she would be nothing but skin and bones, haggard and unsightly. Now, Lady Nellie, do you not think it rude to not at least greet me? We were engaged, as you might recall. Her eyes still unfocused, Nellie turned her gaze down toward where Arthur stood. It was a reaction, but still, he felt as though she'd snubbed him, which did little to alleviate the irritation building up since he'd arrived. Look, it's like a scene right out of your beloved Romeo and Juliet. Not that I'm here enthusiastically, of course. Mumbling complaints to himself, Arthur climbed a nearby tree, leaping from a branch onto the veranda. And there she was, within arm's reach but as distant as ever. Still, he could see nothing in her eyes. Hello? Say something already, would you, Nellie? Perhaps she really had lost her mind, not just in the way he'd been led to believe. Arthur spent a few moments pondering how to proceed. He didn't consider himself a model gentleman like Mel, not even slightly, but he wasn't so crass as to laugh it off either. You certainly are quiet tonight, aren't you? I'm not sure how I'm supposed to act when you're like a completely different person. Every time you open your mouth, I want to sew it shut. You're always complaining. Nothing's ever good enough for you. But right now, I just want you to say something. It's kind of creepy when you think about it. Dude snuck into her backyard after their engagement had been broken off, and he's basically just demanding that she talk to him. Anything. How am I supposed to know what's going through your head if you don't tell me? Or is there just nothing at all? What business is that of his? They're not engaged anymore. Nellie's gaze glided past Arthur into the rose garden behind him. "Nellie, are you listening to me?" He tried again and again to get her attention, calling her name, waving his hand in front of her face, gently tugging on her hair. But all his attempts were fruitless. She simply stood there, lifeless, a well-crafted doll. He wasn't sure exactly how to describe how he felt. Slightly unsettled to start. A bit of pity to go with it, and a great deal of something yanking at his insides. Arthur had few pleasant memories with the Rhodes. That didn't mean he wanted to erase his past with them entirely, though. But looking at her, this empty shell, he felt almost as though those days were disappearing with her. How irritating. He knew the word wasn't right, but he went with it anyway, heaving a sigh after letting it linger in the air for a moment. It's always been like this. I'm no more than a buzzing insect to you. I can't stand this dreadful rose garden. It was exhausting having to come here and again just because our families are close. I would try to say something and you'd go running off into your darling brother's arms. Dearest Mel this, dearest Mel that. Is that all you know how to say? And he'd just give you a half-hearted smile and pretend to be sorry for not paying attention to you. Arthur looked out over the garden as well. He was more talking to himself than he was to Nellie. I'm sure you don't remember, but one time I even brought you flowers. What were they? Some kind of, an anemone? I've never heard of that type of flower before. Anemone, I think, but you wouldn't take them. You said that the roses here were prettier, so you didn't need my flowers. What a miserable day that was. But standing beside this silent specter, melancholy overwhelmed any anger or frustration he might have otherwise felt. Perhaps it was because nothing he said managed to elicit any reaction out of her. Or perhaps because he'd wished he'd come out and said this all sooner. Unless expressed, feelings merely fester. Isn't that just the overall reaching thing of this whole story of Fata Morgana? Is just, if you don't express your feelings, it just doesn't seem to end well. I don't care one bit about you, and I mean that. It's only ever been about doing what's best for my family. Of course, Nellie was a perfect example of why you couldn't let everything out either. The gossip spoke not only of her attacking an Abigail, but of her destroying her relationship with her brother, and that was likely what had done the most damage. Knowing what he knew of Nellie in her younger days, Arthur had little trouble believing what the rumors said, that her affection for Mel went far beyond simple familial love. It was for my family, but that doesn't mean I wasn't going to try to get along with you. You probably don't believe me since I certainly never acted like it, but I genuinely did want us to be on good terms. It's just, you had to be the one who changed first. You were always treating me like I was worthless, like I meant nothing to you. Not like any of that would have even left an impression in your one-track mind, of course. But that's why I wanted you to take the first step. I'm not some wise old monk who can just turn my frustration off on command. Arthur let out another sigh. Do you think anything would have gone differently if I could have been more grown up? A gust of wind blew through, sending up a flurry of rose petals, carrying them up past the two of them, through the velvet curtains into Nellie's bedchamber. A faint smile crossed her lips. Arthur could only guess at what was going through her mind, what was reflected in her eyes. In her room, he could see several pairs of small children's shoes, a doll with its hair all neatly made up, a pile of sheet music drawn up for her by a respected composer years earlier, and toys carved from wood. There's the fact the music stopped makes me like almost, I'm waiting for a jump scare or something. It was like he was looking through a window into the past. That was all he needed to know. He could have treated her like the princess she thought she was, and she would have gone down the same path. Nellie's eyes were on one person only. Arthur wasn't even a shadow on her peripheral. Your brother's still smiling for you in there, isn't he? And that was all she needed. After that night, Arthur stayed away from the Rhodes and never mentioned the siblings again. It was the best thing to do, he thought. He had his own life to worry about. But fate wouldn't allow him to avoid hearing about the family from time to time. About 4 years later, Nellie, who had apparently fallen ill, passed away at the young age of 18. The Rhodes held a small funeral service, which Mel did not attend. Arthur couldn't even begin to imagine what he, her brother, felt about it. But another 3 years later, Mel followed behind her. At the age of 24, he threw himself off the top of a church tower. Oh boy. Did they mention that in the original game? I know that Nellie passed away, but damn. According to those near him, he'd been acting unusual in the months leading up to his death, claiming he could hear a woman's voice talking to him. If he had taken his life out of grief, 3 years seemed like too long of a gap. Perhaps it had built up over time, and that was how long it took him to reach the boiling point. But that's not how it felt to Arthur. It felt like Mel had been guided there by a higher power. Or maybe pushed. And there was one other strange detail. He died at exactly the strike of noon, as the bell rang its 12th toll. Oh wow, that was... Damn, okay, this might be a very quick one. Alright, Defectives. I wonder which story this is gonna follow. Defective. I see the crescent moon, so that's gonna be, what's his name? Imoen? Oh? Oh, Yukimasa. Yukimasa. That is the swordsman. In the distant Hoei era, while the Tokugawa shogunates governed feudal Japan, Yukimasa Ida made his living far to the west with little knowledge of what lay beyond the borders of his own native country. We actually get to see the swordsman's backstory. He's always talked about it in like very vague details because he didn't know much himself. The land of the rising sun was an isolated nation, turning nearly everyone away save for traders from a few specific regions. And those restrictions applied equally to Japanese who had departed the country before they were put in place. Yukimasa was a third-generation immigrant, having never once set foot in his homeland. And for that reason, as a child, he held a great adoration for the glorious nation described by his grandfather. And he was particularly fond of the katana passed down to him by his grandfather. Though it bore no name, the blade had a curiously bestial glimmer that entranced Yukimasa at first sight. The katana had belonged to Yukimasa's grandmother, but she had passed away before he was born. His grandfather described her as a skilled swordswoman, slight in frame but easily able to take down several men more than twice her size. After his grandfather passed and bequeathed unto him the blade, Yukimasa would from time to time see phantoms of a young woman drenched in blood. She had sharp, narrow eyes like him that looked more like his than even his parents'. He felt almost as though his own reflection had stepped out of the mirror to cut him down, or like they were a pair of killers standing shoulder to shoulder. With each recurrence of the illusion, it took root even deeper into his soul, and Yukimasa grew ever more certain that one day he would cross over into her world, that he was simply holding in his true nature, that the beast dwelling within would break loose eventually. This tale, however, is of a time when he was still more man than beast. Defectives. In the wake of framing and killing 2 crewmates for smuggling Spanish silver. Ah, yes, I remember that. Yukimasa was having something of an identity crisis. On both occasions, he'd been smiling during the act, at least according to those who'd seen him. If what they said were true, he wasn't conscious of it, but he didn't particularly doubt their words either. It was, in all likelihood, true. He had killed 2 men and enjoyed doing it. What unsettled Yukimasa, though, was his initial reaction was, I wonder what I'm going to become. Not a moment's concern for the men whose lives he'd stolen. Once their still warm bodies hit the water, that was that. He held no nostalgia for the months they'd spent out at sea together. He didn't care what kind of men they'd been, or how much their families might grieve over the loss. Yukimasa wondered if that made him narcissistic. A lack of interest in anyone but himself seemed to fit the bill, but he didn't actually feel like he held himself in very high stature. He simply had this vague awareness of himself as a twisted, unsightly creature. On that day, the ship stopped at a small port town to replenish supplies and give the crew a few days to stretch its legs. They were still about 2 months out from Amsterdam, where his beloved awaited his return. What a hellish trip that was. A crewman of Western origin naturally muttered. If I never have to hear the word smuggle again, it will be too damn soon. The way the whole crew's got their cheeks clenched after that's about driven me mad. Not blaming you, I mean, it's just how it is. Yukimasa shook his head and gave the man a faint smile. And in his mind he chuckled about how no one could seem to see through his mask. That almost feels like, that sounds more like a sociopath than, like, narcissistic. Where it's this whole thing about, like, how he is putting on a facade and he's kind of, like, enjoying the fact that he can get away with it. He's be like, oh yes, they think that I'm, like, a decent person. I've got everybody fooled. The blame lay with him for much more than just the tension on the ship. Real shit job you got stuck with there. I don't know if I'd have been able to do it, keep a straight face like you did. I bet you're aching to let off some steam, ain't ya? You can be straight with me. I could certainly stand for some relief, yes. That much was true. However, Yukimasa meant it in a very different way. Come with me tonight, then. I know the perfect place to get you just what you need. The tanned seaman smirked, which was all Yukimasa needed to know what he was insinuating. He hesitated to come up with a response. Worried about Captain Asama? Don't. I ain't gonna tell him. Besides, it's not like he doesn't have needs too, you get me? Some of the crew knew Yukimasa was romantically involved with the captain's daughter, and the man standing before him seemed to assume his hesitation stemmed from that. But Captain Asama would, as the seafarer had said, spend his time off satisfying his personal needs. That was just part of life on the sea. Everyone understood, and no one considered it being unfaithful. Requiring a ship full of vigorous young men to save themselves for their partners, who they'd often not see for months at a time, could in fact be considered a form of torture. There were a number of brothels scattered about the port town. Oh goddamn, is Yukimasa just gonna go and cut down a bunch of women? For them, sailors were particularly the ideal candidates, or practically the ideal candidates. A ship only stayed around for a few days to a week, meaning no time to get attached or cause other similar problems. About the only complaint a prostitute might have is the sailors tended to be quite pent up. They weren't the kind of clientele a new recruit could generally handle. That settles it. Tonight, grab something to eat, and then we'll meet up at... Yukimasa forced a smile for the man, who'd taken his silence as a yes. But he wasn't worried about Captain Asama finding out or being unfaithful to Pauline. He simply wasn't sure how much he could trust the seaman's recommendation. And the last thing he wanted was to catch some kind of disease. Yukimasa was paired up with a skeletal girl with faded brown hair, which she had done up so much it only served to emphasize the lack of anything anywhere else on her body. This is your idea of the perfect place? He couldn't deny his disappointment at his assignment, who boasted absolutely nothing of what he sought in a woman. In fact, he was afraid he might snap her in half. As the other pairs heated up beyond the thin curtains, Yukimasa's interest plummeted. If a woman tried to seduce him, he would act in accordance with the base instincts, but otherwise, Yukimasa didn't have a particularly strong libido, so... You're not into this at all, are you? Maybe he's just gonna let me just torture you a little bit instead. No, it's fine. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you want to trade me for another girl. I used to have a few regulars, but these days I've got nothing. Sooner or later, they're gonna toss me out on my ass, and I'll have to resort to back alley quickies to make a living. You're the customer. You've got every right to complain to the manager about drawing the short straw. She sounded like a woman hanging from her last thread. I'm not going to cause any trouble for you. Well, aren't you sweet? You're lost, she said with a snicker. I object to being called sweet, but anyway, I stand out more than most, so if I make a scene, it's more likely to escalate. You even went out of the way to explain yourself, so I object to your objection, but you do have a point. You're from the Far East, aren't you? You don't see many of your kind around these parts, so it's no surprise you draw attention. You know what? I've changed my mind. Don't ask for another girl. Clients like you come around only once in a blue moon, so I'd rather not let you go. Let's both avoid making a fuss and stay here together. You make it sound like I'm some kind of exotic animal. You're cute when you scowl. We can find out if you're an animal later, but you certainly are exotic. You're not even going to pretend this is a business exchange anymore, are you? I mean, why bother? I'm just the leftover scraps that nobody wanted. There was something oddly charming about her gleeful laugh combined with a stream of self-deprecation, which would have been less of an issue for Yukimasa had he become physically intimate with Pauline yet, because by comparison, this prostitute would look like nothing more than a couple of dried twigs tied together. But he wouldn't be able to see Pauline for another couple of months, and he was beginning to think this girl might just do the trick for now. Their ship was scheduled to stay in port for about a week. Although they would have to spend some time moving cargo on and off the boat, the stay was, by and large, a recreational one. It was early afternoon, and while much of the crew had gathered together to go drinking, Yukimasa was taking a relaxed walk along the shore. He was no less interested in exploring the unfamiliar port town as anyone else, but unlike them, he wasn't the kind of man whose first instinct was to go straight to the pub. They all jabbed at him for being stiff and tight-assed, none the wiser to the primal urges he kept buried within. And who would even suspect it either? Who could watch him walk up to an elderly man fishing on the dock, ask, "How's the catch?" with a smile, and imagine a bloodthirsty beast lurked within? The man gave a lazy nod in return, adding, "Ain't half bad today." "You're a sailor, I wager, am I right?" the man said, as Yukimasa made to resume his walk. "You are. Well, a warning for you then, outsider. You do your best to stay away from any back alleys after dark." He's like, well, that's exactly what I'm going to do then, because I'm like, then I can kill people. And I won't feel bad about it. It ain't safe at night, no how. Yukimasa gave the man a half-smile, feeling somewhat patronized by his warning. He was plenty capable of discerning where the dangerous parts of town were, and he was confident in his ability to defend himself if someone tried to attack. I mean, I don't think, like, he's gonna go out of his way to, like, find trouble, but he's not gonna hesitate if someone steps to him. There's already been several victims. Yukimasa froze. As in, murders? Killed deader and dead. And they still ain't caught him, neither. Yukimasa, the accidental, like, serial killer, stopper? Balancing the good with the bad, I guess. He's like, oh yeah, I've killed people before, but it's just like, but if I stop somebody from killing a bunch of innocent people, then I'm not all bad. They still ain't caught him, neither. I wouldn't want any of our guests to end up next on the list. Out of curiosity, how does he kill? The old man turned his gaze down, his face becoming a shadow against the clear blue ocean stretching out behind him. He dismembers them. Hard to imagine, eh? Cutting a person into a bunch of pieces? He don't discriminate neither. Man, woman, child, don't matter none. That sounds like Yukimasa's too. He's a sicko, a complete madman. And they ain't found no pattern to the victims neither. Nothing to say who he might be or who he might choose next. So don't think you're safe just because you're not from around here. Yukimasa could feel his vision narrowing, converging on a single point. Oh, he could imagine. He could imagine clear as the afternoon sky. And oh, how he wished that could be. Well, look who it is. Fancy running into you here. A woman's voice dragged him back to reality. I had a feeling, I was like, oh, is he gonna have like some weird accidental friendship with this like prostitute? So I'm guessing she's probably gonna be one of the next victims. And he's gonna save her. And he's gonna feel weird about it. He felt like he'd just been pulled up from the bottom of the ocean, and when he turned to face her, he must have still looked a bit dazed, judging by the way she raised her eyebrow at him. Oh, let me guess. You don't recognize me not all made up for work? It's me, the girl from yesterday. She held her hair up in approximation of her previous night's hairstyle, to which Yukimasa gave an ah and feigned realization. So what are you doing wandering out here? Bored? Got nothing better to do? He wondered if the woman was even capable of being less blunt, especially considering he had technically been her client the night before. I'm just taking a walk. Not much to see out here. There's the ocean. Don't you get enough of that when you're out on it? I'll never tire of the sight of the sea. Is that so? She said, followed by a softer, slightly exasperated, I'll never understand guys. But a few seconds later, she gave him a big smile. So, hey, you're not busy. Why don't you come back to my place? I can throw together a bare-bones little lunch. Again, I'm taking a walk, and bare bones is hardly a convincing sales pitch. I'm saying if you want a quality meal, pony up for some goods. Ah, so that was what she meant. Apathetic, but finding no reason to turn her invitation down, Yukimasa agreed to go along. I've taken a liking to you, she said. Stop by whenever you got the chance, at least until you have to take off. I can treat you even better than when I'm on the job, and free of charge. What do you have to lose? So that's exactly what Yukimasa did. Seeing her became part of his daily routine, and the more time they spent together, the more he learned about her. She had once been married and planning to start a family, but money troubles led to debt piling on, which led to her husband running out on her. And with the entirety of their debt on her shoulders, she had to start working, which was how she ended up at the brothel. As she told her story, Yukimasa showed a fair degree of sympathy, but took the whole thing with a grain of salt. If everything she said was true, she had had a hard life indeed, but there was no guarantee it was. Yukimasa made certain not to be openly dismissive or skeptical, though, to play the good listener. There was one thing he could be certain of, though. He felt a tiny bit of solidarity in the woman's solitude. A sense she was missing something. A sense she had a hunger. A sense she had a hole that couldn't be filled. A sense that she was defective. You know, we get on pretty well, don't you think? Maybe you could, I don't know, take me as your mistress? She sounded like she was only playing around, but still he responded with, it's not wise to pair two defectives together. What is that supposed to mean? She said with a scowl. Yukimasa's ship was to depart the following day, and that evening the woman asked him to stay the night, to which he was unsure how to react. Don't you have work? I'll just say I wasn't feeling well. It's not like anyone wants me there. But don't you need I can survive taking one day off. I want to be with you. And with that, he could come up with no further objections. Regardless of what he did, he'd be heading back up to sea the following day, likely never to see the woman again. So, rather than waste time debating her own life choices, It'd be easier for everyone if he just let her do as she pleased. Tomorrow, none of it would be his concern after all. He agreed, and she gave him a big smile in response. I'm going to make you a feast tonight, she said. You're paying, though. Yukimasa wondered if perhaps what she wanted most was to play like they were a real family. That was probably it. What she was missing in her life wasn't love or romance, but someone to sit around the table and enjoy a meal with. But that raised a new question. What happened after she'd had her fun? She found someone to fill the hole in her spirit, but it was fake, and the hole wouldn't stay filled forever. Oh, I'm doing something terribly cruel to her, aren't I? There's nothing he could do about that anymore, though. Even if she were to ask him to stay, he didn't have that option. He's such an interesting character, where just, like, sometimes he seems to kind of, like, have some weird, like, duper's delight about feeling like he tricks people into believing his facade, and then sometimes he seems to actually connect with people and, like, empathize with them, but at the same time he's also kind of dismissive of her, but he understands. I don't know, it's hard. It's hard with him. Like, the other characters, it's so easy to latch on to him. With him, I guess he is supposed to feel a little bit, like, alien to us a little bit. Like, we have a hard time grasping his character, because even he has a hard time sometimes with it. May I ask you something, he said. Yeah? How did it feel when you lost your family, your sanctuary? You sure know how to go right for the heart. I apologize. I don't want to think about anything that might bring my mood down. If you want to know what it feels like, experience it for yourself. Find yourself a girl and get her to run off on you. Seemingly taking his silence for discomfort, the woman let out a soft laugh and said, But I don't want you to have to go through that. Supper was a seafood stew. Hardly a feast, but there was a homely warmth to the meal, something she had likely honed over the years. When a man is incomplete, missing a vital part of what makes him human, what becomes of him? Does he lash out? Does he lose the will to live? Does he forget what kind of man he is? Yukimasa didn't think he fit into any of those categories. In the middle of the night, Yukimasa silently slipped out of bed and made his way for the door. Wait, but he didn't make it 2 steps before the woman grabbed him by the sleeve. She must have been awake the whole time. There was no way she could have noticed him leaving otherwise. Don't do this to me. I've had more than enough of waking up to an empty bed, and I'm not going to let it happen again, not this time. You may think sneaking off without a word is the cleanest way to end things, but you're wrong. Stay until morning. Let me say a proper goodbye. No, I wasn't. You weren't what? Of course you were. I don't care if you think of me as free tail for the week, or you're just going to forget about it when it's over. I'm using you for my own personal satisfaction, too. But the one thing I won't stand for is you to just get up and disappear on me. You're not the one being left behind, so you don't understand how worthless and pathetic that makes you feel. It hurts. It hurts so much more than anything else you could do. Don't leave me. That was probably what she wanted to say more than anything. The loneliness that had created the hole in her heart was making waves, and this was the real desire that lay hidden in her words. She didn't want to be alone anymore. I'm not leaving. I'll be back. There's something I wanted to give you, and I was just going to go get it. And what would that be? It's my way of showing gratitude. I think the word you're looking for is present? Yes, that. Her eyes were locked with Yukimasa's. She was staring through the darkness in an attempt to ascertain how truthful he was being. After 10 or 15 seconds of glaring, she let him go. Like I say, he's so strange. Like, he's a killer, but he doesn't want to hurt her feelings. I guess he sees some camaraderie in her or something, but... I won't be long, he said with a smile. As he walked down the moonlit porch, Yukimasa's mind raced. No one truly understands themselves more than superficially. Some say you know yourself best. Others say it's quite the opposite. The concept of the self is full of such uncertainties. Contradictions. Yukimasa suspected he was suppressing himself with his self. So while he had a reasonable grasp on who his outer self was, his inner self was a complete mystery, and that fact sometimes sent a chill down his spine. Who was he? What did he want in life? Which self, which of his desires, was the real him? Self, 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 self. He felt sick. About 30 minutes later, he was back. Within seconds of him knocking on the woman's door, it was open. She must have been waiting there, anxious for his return. The woman met his eyes, gave him a pouty smile, and then slowly lowered her gaze. Her eyes gradually widened, shooting up and down as they did. I've never been very good at thinking of anyone other than myself. I consider myself proficient enough at conversation, but if I'm not careful, my mind always seems to drift back to myself instead of focusing on who I'm talking to. That said, I've spent a great deal of time thinking about you. The woman took a step back. Oh, Yukimasa followed, and I've concluded this is the best way for me to make you happy. Oh, she doesn't seem like she's happy about this. What's he gonna do to her? Oh shit, she didn't even have time to let out a shriek. It was only the sound of steel slicing flesh, metal grinding against bone, as the nameless katana pierced the woman's breast. God damn it, I knew... okay. I think I knew deep down he was gonna kill her. But I was saying about how, like, maybe there was the whole thing about, like, oh, there's a guy going around dismembering people. That wasn't Yukimasa, because he just got there not that long ago. Or maybe the killings only started once Yukimasa showed up at the port. I didn't even make that connection, like, oh, there's another serial killer running around. So maybe that's the thing. It was like, she'll be with me with the katana. Like, if I stab her with the katana, then she'll be with me forever, or something like that. Her mouth flapped open and shut, while her eyes were held wide open, fixed on the man standing before her. Faint gasps escaped her lips and sputters. Perhaps she wanted to scream. Perhaps she wanted to cry and shout and say this wasn't what she wanted. But there wasn't enough strength left in her emaciated body to do either. As blood spilled down the side of her lips, she mustered the last scraps of her strength, and with it she forced out her parting words, carefully chosen and enunciated to ensure he heard every last one. You pitiful man. What kind of hopeless fool would throw their life away just to kill a worthless prostitute? She cursed him as her life slipped away. Yukimasa, however, let out a laugh and muttered, Don't you worry, I still have enough control to not act sheerly on impulse. Damn. Hey, Yukimasa, you hear about that whore you've been banging? She was killed last night, cut to pieces like the others. God, I feel so dumb that I didn't make that connection that Yukimasa was the serial killer who's been going around killing people. I just assumed maybe it'd been happening before he even showed up. But I should have, like... It should have tipped me off when they said that the person killed indiscriminately, because even I said, I'm like, oh, that's like Yukimasa. They're like kindred spirits. God, I'm such an idiot. I'm so dumb. I swear it's like trouble follows you wherever you go. Lord Almighty, stay away from me, man. I don't want to catch the attention of whatever evil spirit's taken a liking to you. That was probably best. He would be safer keeping his distance. Yukimasa gazed idly out at the port town as it faded out of view. He then turned toward the ocean. That vast, familiar blue expanse. The waves against the boat sounded vaguely like splashing blood. Oh, Yukimasa, you never disappoint. With just being a monster. Can I ask you something, Pauline? Yukimasa said in the warm embrace of his sweetheart. Anything. What would you think if I were actually an unspeakably evil man? Huh? Where did that come from? She asked with a smile, evidently assuming the question was in jest. Idle curiosity. Well, bad people come in all shapes and forms. What sort of bad things would you do? I feel like if a man or a woman or anybody in your relationship says that to you, that is a big old red flag. How about committing murder? Deceiving people? The words that came from Yukimasa's mouth were not the ones he'd prepared to say, which came as a surprise even to him. Why had he not been able to say what he'd wanted? What reason could he have possibly had? Did he not want to raise any suspicions? No, that wasn't it. Is being dishonest really evil? Sure, it's bad if you lie to cheat someone out of their money or cause them pain, but no one's perfectly honest with everyone they meet. I try to be straightforward and truthful as best as I can, but I'm sure I slip from time to time. So listen to me, Yukimasa. Pauline gave a wide, infinitely loving smile. Even if you have something to hide, something you're ashamed to tell me, that won't change how I feel about you. You've got nothing to worry about. Besides? I plan to be with you for years and years to come. You want to know what my life's dream is? I'd love to. My dream is to live out a long, quiet life with you. I don't need anything extravagant. Just an ordinary life, slowly growing older, having 3, maybe 4 children. We'd never fight, and eventually, before I knew it, I'd be an old lady thinking, it was an uneventful life, but it was the best I could have asked for. That's the life I want. And what about you? Ah, now he understood. He didn't want to risk cracking the foundation she provided him, the sanctuary she formed around him. Yes, I too wish for a peaceful life with you. Damn, alright, so, well, we have things from, like, Mel and Nellie. We've got Defectives, which is about Yukimasa. So that would make me think that the third one would be about Yakubo, because those were like the doors in the original. But this whole main story with this game focused on Yakubo. So the painting's ramblings makes me think, like, is that going to be Michelle's brother? Because wasn't he in the painting in the mansion? And George certainly does like to ramble, doesn't he? The painting's ramblings. Why, hello there, Giselle. Doing your rounds again? Such a diligent young lady you are. You could get away with cleaning this place once every couple of decades, and no one would be the wiser. What, you're not Giselle? That's someone else? Oh, no, you. You're just the maid? And who am I, you ask? Well, this is quite the pickle. What on earth could have happened while I was dozing off? You think you're just a maid, and you think you're the witch at the same time? You've forgotten just about everything, and I don't think anything I say is going to fix that. You do seem a bit mellower now, and not so constantly miserable. I wasn't sure what to say to you before, or if I should say anything at all, so I didn't say much out of consideration for you. Not that you could really tell from looking at me, I guess. If forgetting takes some weight off you, then maybe it's for the best. Not that I think you should forget, and not that I want you to forget about Michelle, but I won't blame you for choosing not to spend God knows how much longer agonizing over it. And nothing wrong with abandoning ship, especially considering how long you've spent on it. And hey, it hurt me too seeing you in so much pain, so we both come out on top here, I guess. What a kind painting, you say. Well, thank you kindly, but the truth is, I'm not nearly as upstanding a guy as people think I am, and it was us Bullingers that turned your life upside down and caused you all that misery and suffering. Good point. I didn't even make that connection about, like, that, you know, George was the one in the painting, but he also knew what happened to her, or, like, knew who she was before she got here. Yeah, I know. The first dumbfounded smile was testament enough. Everything I say is going in one ear and out the other. Which means I'm free to say whatever I want. By the time tomorrow rolls around, you'll have forgotten about all the curious talking painting you chanced upon today. So I'll start with this. It's a huge relief to see you smiling again. It's not the smile of someone right in the head, I can see that much. But it's a lot easier on the eyes and the heart than how you were before. Like I said, I'm a real winner. I'm not particularly concerned about putting up appearances here. Call me heartless if you will, you wouldn't be wrong. I'm not going to pretend I'm some saint, but at the same time, I'm not going to play like I'm a cackling villain either. There's one thing I don't want people to see, though. It's me looking weak. I'm the laid-back guy without a care in the world. That's who I want people to see when they look at me. My big brother was your standard cookie-cutter, you can count on me for anything kind of brother. I mean, that ended up not being the case, but he sure looked the part. And Michelle, he always looked up to Dee. Went to him for everything. Gave him all his love. Dee was tall and well-built, muscular. Everything about him screamed manly man. George, he's got classic middle child energy here. Feeling a little bit forgotten about, so he's like, well, I gotta be a little bit of a clown to get attention. And I kind of admire that too, though not nearly as much as Michelle did. Actually, I think, like, being a little bit more, like, acting out and, like, being a little goofy and being, like, kind of more outgoing, that feels more like younger. I'm not sure. I'm the older sibling. My brother is definitely, like, younger sibling syndrome, where he's definitely more, like, outgoing and a little bit goofy. And he likes attention. Middle children, they seem to kind of, like, they just are kind of like the quiet ones, just, like, going about their business, not wanting to cause too much trouble, just, like, you know, doing their thing. Middle children in the comments, you can let me know if I'm right or wrong about that, but that seems to kind of be, like, the stereotype. It's just, like, they're able to kind of slip through the cracks and just, like, do their own thing and not really draw too much attention to themselves, for good or for bad. I became a painter in part because I didn't want to follow in my brother's footsteps. Not to say I don't like painting. I love it, but people weren't going to be inclined to compare us as often. I didn't have to be as fit as him or as good at chess. I had my own thing to be good at, art. I couldn't beat him at his own game, so I beat him at mine. And my whole not a care in the world deal was probably, at least on some level, a shield against having to admit I couldn't compare. That's the thing, is I guess it's like they also want to kind of forge their own thing and, like, they don't want to be compared to the other siblings. So it's like, okay, well, I'm going to have my own interests that are completely separate so that I'm my own person. If I were a few years further apart, maybe I could have just had the same admiration and respect for him as Michelle. But there's not much getting past that boyish competitiveness when you're so close in age. I know I've been rambling at you for a while already, but would you mind sticking around a little longer? Great, I've got an old story I'd like to get off my chest. This is something I was planning to take to the grave, and something I don't think Giselle ever needs to know. But well, you say you're not Giselle anymore, and I'm already in the grave, so what the hell. I'm just gonna talk to myself for a bit here, and if you'd kindly forget anything you may overhear, that would be lovely. Oh, we're gonna get some more information on, like, the siblings? Back before I became a painting, I was the head of the Bollinger family, though I spent most of my life painting. It really wasn't the job for me, though. A guy who half-assed his way straight through life. So I left all my businessy stuff to my wife. Oh, Amy. Oh, her. Now, she was a real capable girl. Or Amy, I guess if he wants to be French. Amy. She is sort of like ami, which is friend. She is no friend to anyone. If she'd been born a guy, she would have made one heck of a diplomat. Possibly even caught the king's eye. Before we were married, she'd had a bit of a fling with Dee, which she felt real bad about later. Probably didn't help I had a tendency to bring it up from time to time. Oh, so then we're going to go into, like, their relationship. This will be interesting. Not all the time, just occasionally. But that aside, she was a faithful, hard-working partner. It didn't take long for us to be known as the dope and his able bride. To which Amy would always interject, "George is a very capable man, thank you very much." Now, that probably makes it sound like I shoved all the work of running the house onto her. But in truth, she wanted the job. She quite enjoyed it, and who was I to complain? It also meant I didn't have to deal with one of the family's more significant dilemmas, namely, my mother. Not to be crass, but Mom was not quite all there. She'd always been a bit of a nervous wreck, and it didn't take much to set her off, but it was what happened with Michelle that finally broke her. Mom had, I guess you could say, a very particular image of what she wanted Michelle to be, and he ended up not fitting that image. Now, you're probably thinking, that doesn't seem like such a big deal, but it is. I just can't tell you why. Michelle has to be the one to tell you. Anyway, some bad stuff went down, and at the end of it all, Mom was constantly hovering over the edge. Dad gave up on her entirely, and I just wasn't sure how to approach her, so I kept my distance. Amy was the only one in the family who would actively engage with Mom. So while she'd betrayed me once, I had come to trust Amy again. We had a couple of kids, I turned into a doting father, and life was swell. All my problems swept under the rug. Mom's condition, Michelle. I left it all to Amy and enjoyed a pleasant, carefree life. But then Giselle, or I guess you're just the maid now. Not long after, Michelle died. My oh my, you really aren't Giselle anymore, huh? So, back to my rambling. Michelle died, and I got furious at Dee over it. Oh shit. So this is the fallout about what happened, learning that Dee was the one who killed Michelle. But I kept coming back to that. Who really deserved the brunt of the blame in that situation? It's nice and comfy to sit back and do nothing. You can throw blame around all you want. It wasn't your fault after all. You're not the one who killed him, you know? It wasn't long afterwards that Dee died too, killed on the battlefield. I was told he died a very noble death, but I couldn't help but think he was in a hurry to escape. Listening to the news, I kept telling myself, I should have snapped at him like that, or I shouldn't have snapped at him like that. I shouldn't have blamed him. Dee had to choose between protecting Mom or protecting our brother, and he settled on Mom. He was too hard-headed to come up with a way to protect them both. Though even if he had, it was too risky. He served the church directly, and we were all under its thumb. Word spread that one of our own had supposedly sold his soul to the devil. That would be the end of the Bollinger family. I wouldn't have escaped unscathed either. Wow, that's crazy that I didn't know that. George was the last one left. Losing both my brothers in quick succession crushed me. What about the mom? I started breaking down. It was, you guessed, Amy who comforted me. It's terrible what happened, but it's not your fault. That was around when I began sensing something was off. I wouldn't be surprised if Amy was the one going around, like, whispering in everybody's ears and, like, having them die, or she was, like, directly involved in, like, Dee's murder. Because she's just a stone cold, like, man, she's scary. I mean, she'd had a thing with Dee. You'd expect she would have been bawling her eyes out right alongside me. So why on earth was she so calm? But I didn't press her on it. I knew I wouldn't get an answer even if I did. And I also didn't have much of a right to question Amy when I was pushing all my problems onto her. Doubly so, knowing opening my dumb mouth was what had done this to Dee in the first place. And before long, we were back to our normal routine. About 8 years after Michelle's death, Mom was gone too, and the Bullinger family was down to me, Amy, and our 2 sons. I'd started teaching the boys how to paint, and I loved every minute of it. And then one day, I started feeling them all, oh, did she poison him? So she's like, I'm control the family now. She probably killed the mom too. Like, I would be surprised if she poisoned the mom as well. I know the mom was sick beforehand, but my fingers would get kind of tingly, such that holding a brush for long periods of time would hurt. So gradually my time spent both teaching and painting dwindled, and even leaving the manor became difficult. At first, I just thought it was a little strange, nothing to be worried about. But then it started getting real bad, and I'd be stuck in bed for days at a time. I called a doctor to look at me, but he couldn't find anything wrong. Amy said I must be overworking myself, and she made me these nice hearty meals, hoping to bring back my energy. Probably a little bit something added to it. But my condition only got worse. Eventually, I started losing my appetite. But Amy, she insisted I eat anyway, or I would never get better. So you know what I did? I tossed out the meals she made me when she wasn't looking. I sent my younger boy out to town to buy me food in secret, and for a while I ate that instead of Amy's meals, making sure it looked like nothing had changed. And after a week or two, the tingling in my fingers started going away. I could only laugh and grit my teeth, then cry my eyes out. Poor guy. Like, he truly seems like he loves Amy and, like, thought that their life was good, and then to realize that she's trying to kill him. I made a life with this woman, trusted her, and she goes and does this? Anger and sorrow were drowned out by raw heartbreak. I don't think he's gonna do anything to her, and I want that comeuppance with her so bad, but I feel like she's gonna get away with it, because she seems to get away with everything. My firstborn, he was getting to be about the age where he could take over, which is why I'd used my younger son to run errands for me. I couldn't be sure the two weren't working together. I was at a total loss. What are you supposed to do when your wife is trying to poison you to a slow death? Even now, I'm not sure what the right course of action in the situation would have been. Maybe I could have banished her, had her punished, but remember, I was only head in name. She handled everything. There was no way I'd have been able to pick up the pieces after throwing her out. This is why she is very capable. She intentionally, like, basically, from the beginning, was like, I will take care of everything, so he had to rely on her and be dependent on her. So, like, he, you know, if there's a situation like this came up, or even if he found out she was trying to kill him, he can't get rid of her because then he won't know what to do. And if my suspicions were right, and my older boy was in on it too, getting rid of Amy wouldn't have solved anything. What then? Spend the rest of my days living in fear of my own family? Well, now you know how Michelle feels. I was by that point worn thin, both physically and emotionally. Every thought led me to the worst possible outcome. I couldn't for the life of me come up with a workable solution. Eventually I got it in my head it was punishment, that I deserved it. Obviously, what Amy was doing wasn't right, but my hands weren't exactly clean either. Maybe Mom could have recovered if I'd looked after her. Maybe Dee would still be alive if I'd put myself in his shoes instead of just snapping at him. Maybe if I'd given everyone the care and attention they deserved, Michelle wouldn't have had to die. Burying your head in the sand doesn't absolve you of responsibility. And when I finally realized how great a sin inaction was, it was far too late. I'm dumb, short-sighted, and I hated myself for not figuring that out sooner. It should have been stupidly obvious what my action and inaction were doing to the people around me. I should have seen all of this coming. Yeah, Amy betrayed me, but she wasn't the only one guilty of that. When I was going through Michelle's stuff after his death, I came across a painting that had been torn to shreds, that I had made. By refusing to use my head, I had done something that denied his identity. He left this world still carrying the pain I'd caused him. By the time I'd come to that conclusion, I wondered why I was even alive at all. I couldn't blame anyone for wanting me dead. So I started eating— oh my god. Oh, this is so tragic. What is it about the brothers, man? Like, Michelle and the brothers. Those are always the moments that get me. It was mostly Dee and Michelle. But this is so sad. This is like him being like, I know that I'm gonna die if I do this, but it's like, this is like my punishment. I started eating Amy's meals again, knowing good and well it would likely kill me. I didn't stop sending my younger boy out, though. Just not for food. I also strongly encouraged him to move out and become a court artist. And I started painting again. It was going to be my final piece. Every day, the tingling in my hands spread a little farther. My breathing grew a little bit more labored. I hope we get to see the painting. Maybe it'll be Michelle. Maybe he'll paint Michelle the way that Michelle wanted to be seen, as like a penance. The tingling in my hand spread a little farther. My breathing grew a little bit more labored. I was afraid I might not finish while I was still able to get out of bed, but I somehow managed. It was the most harrowing experience I'd ever had painting something in my life. True to her facade, Amy stayed at my side until my last breath. She held my hand tight, giving me a strange smile. It didn't occur to me at the time, but Amy always seemed to be smiling, no matter what. In a way, it's kind of impressive how she managed to keep up with the loving wife act while simultaneously loading me up with poison. Tell me, Amy, how deep did your poison flow? When you were looking after Mom, did you talk about Michelle? Knowing you probably figured out he was still alive. And I bet you read his final letter to her. It was you who pushed her to set everything in motion, wasn't it? There were so many other things I wanted to say, but I stayed my tongue and made these my parting words. I loved you so much, Amy, so I ask you this. Keep my last painting in memory of me. I have no idea if she actually did as I requested, but the last thing I saw before I passed was her nodding, a smile on her lips. The paint I used to make it, I mixed it with a special something I had my younger boy go out and buy for me. A substance that, according to what I was told, slowly dissolves into the air, making it toxic. Oh, shit! Alright, well, look at him with a little bit. Hopefully it won't, and that's why he said, that's why he told the younger son, like, move out, move away, so he's gonna kill Amy and potentially his older son. And it has some sort of reaction with the paint as well, turning it almost black. Oh, shit! I'm quite proud of how it turned out, if I do say so myself. It was a gorgeous landscape painting. Of course, the painting! That's why he's in the painting. Ugh. That was awesome. That was an awesome reveal. Sorry for rambling at you for so long. That's the end of my story. Were you even listening to me? What, you have to go clean the fireplace? Well, alright. Don't let me keep you. Just please make sure you forget everything by tomorrow, alright? I'm counting on you. I know. Why even say anything, right? I wanted to tell someone. I just don't want anyone to actually know about it. The human heart is a big ball of contradictions like that, you know? You don't? Oh, okay. Well, see ya. It'll be around a few decades before you come by again. It'll be another few decades before you come by again, I imagine. And when you do, will it be our first time meeting again? Will you even be able to hear my voice anymore by then? Maybe it would be best if I forgot everything too. Who knows? So long, maid, and take care. When an angel comes to judge me, how will his scales tilt? Towards forgiveness or towards reckoning? But, you know, I don't want it to be an angel who makes that decision. No. You don't have to be an angel. You don't have to be an angel at all. That was a good one too. Damn. It's funny because the title of Slow Killing Poison would have actually worked for the painting's rambling story too, but that would have been too much of a giveaway. Alright, so in terms of like new information, like we did learn some new stuff. It's like in the grand scheme of things, it's like they were saying with this about like these stories are just other fragments of things and not really important to people who aren't the main characters, but I thought they were interesting all the same. I just that last one, especially with Amy, where it's just like, she's still up to her old tricks, but hopefully in the end, you know, she did get what was coming to her over time, except she would not even know that that was like George kind of enacting his revenge on her. But it was nice to like see some more about the characters that like either characters that we didn't know too much about, like with the fiance of Nellie or Yukimasa and George, like finding out a little bit more about them. Overall, that was a good one. I definitely preferred like the last week's sub episode, but this one was good too. And after that, we are going to have Happily Ever After, which hopefully will be, but given this game, I don't have a lot of faith that it will actually be Happily Ever After. Maybe, we'll see. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned next week for the final sub episode. Until then, bye. Special shoutouts to my top tier patrons: Kiori Makoto, SM, Revealing Storm, Tequila Mockingbird, Asborn Kennedy, Harry Gazif, iCognito, Jared Fan, Joel Oostman, and Zoran Ether.